Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to go over a comparison between the Tucktec kayak and the Oru Lake. I'm comparing these two models. The Oru has a variety of kayak models and variety of prices, but this model is most similar to the Tucktec in that it's just closed in the front and back and it's just like a wide open inside. They have similar lengths. I'll put the comparison here, and they have similar widths. The weights are quite a bit different because the Oru is made of a corrugated plastic, which is much lighter, whereas the Tucktec is made of 1/8 inch solid plastic. So it's quite heavy. Well, heavier than the Oru, but not really heavy in itself. So overall, it's not super heavy, especially compared to hard shell kayaks that are much heavier. And it is quick to assemble. They're both quick to assemble. They both fold up pretty small, although different form factors. Like the Lake does fold up taller but shorter, whereas the Tucktec is flatter but longer. So whichever fits your open space, that's ideal for you. The Tucktec does come in a variety of colors, whereas the Oru comes in white and black. But the biggest difference between the two, I believe, is not just the materials and the weight, but the price. The Oru Lake base model comes at $500 without the paddle, whereas the Tucktec comes in at $350, and it doesn't look like the paddle comes with it. It looks like you have to order it yourself. I couldn't figure out if it does when you order it, so you may have to call them. But when I got mine, I got it off a Kickstarter, and they did include the paddles with the kayak. And I believe now, though, they sell a different paddle, so it's not comparative at all. Now, again, this was a Kickstarter Tucktec, so the newer models are a little different. They kind of fold up the same. Overall principle is the same, the folding principle is the same, material is the same. And then there's the Oru. Definitely shorter and a little taller. You get a sense of the width here, although right now it looks bigger, but as I pan across, you'll see it's much shorter. The Tucktec comes out at just about 4 feet long, whereas the Oru is a little shorter. One thing you notice right away is the Oru folds up sleek. It's just one nice package. Everything's all enclosed. You can have the base model seat in there and it's all tight. And it has a nice little handle, like a briefcase handle, easy to carry. Whereas the Tucktec, these foam inserts go in here. And unfortunately, they slide out pretty easily. You do have to kind of trick it to stay. And it does have these clips in here that kind of stick out. And that adds to the overall length of the kayak when folded up, but it's not mentioned. In fact, I don't know if I can make it go inside at all. I'll have to try to assemble it with this inside, but that definitely adds to the length of the kayak. You can really see the material, just thick 1/8 inch plastic, and you could even see where it's folded. It doesn't cut in at all. It's actually quite durable. I would even say it's much more durable than the Oru. The Tucktec is definitely designed differently. It just rolls out. It just rolls in, rolls out, and you put all these things inside as you unroll and unroll. I'm not going to show you how to assemble it or disassemble it necessarily because I haven't assembled it in a while, and I've been using the Lake quite a bit, so I'm going to be much faster with that than this. But I'll assemble it, get back to you, and I'll go over the key points of how it's assembled. Here they are, side by side. This is the white Oru Lake, and this is the Tucktec Kickstarter model, which is, I believe, like 2019. I can't remember the exact year. I'll have to put it here. But this is the original design, I believe. And then for Kickstarter, they started making out of recycled plastic. So this is the recycled plastic version. It's a lot heavier. It took a lot longer for me to assemble. There are a few things that make it a little more complicated. There are more straps, there's more buckles. I'll go over those here in a minute. But overall, it's sturdy. They both feel really sturdy. I'll show you the weakness of this kayak. They're both rated, I believe this one's rated for 300 pounds and this one's rated for 250. But a lot of people say that this is really 250. Some people say if they weigh too much, it'll actually start buckling in itself, especially if the sun is strong, because it'll make the plastic more supple, make it weaker. And I'll show you what they're talking about though, because I haven't noticed it myself because I run about 165 pounds, but I do understand what they're talking about the flex thing. As you can see, they're pretty similar design. They're both wide open. They just have a little bit of top and back. The seats on the Oru looks like it's very well engineered, whereas the Tucktec kind of looks like they kind of slapped it together. It functions. It's not as comfortable, but I find the foam they use does keep my butt very dry, especially if you fold it over on itself. You get a little extra height and your butt stays completely dry. And if you're a little bigger, your butt's going to hang off the sides because it's a very narrow seat. But overall, the seat is good enough and it has a high support. Again, this is an earlier model, so the newer Tucktecs, the seats are completely different, but I believe they still use a foam. The purpose of this foam, it's closed cell foam, is not only to keep your butt dry and give you a little cushion, but if the kayak does fill with water, these things will help the kayak float. So as it is, they state that if the whole thing was filled with water, it would float because of these foam pads on the sides, as well as the seat itself, and they're all attached firmly. Without them, it's just hard plastic, so it'll sink like nobody's business. The newer models of the Tucktecs just have a metal bar on the side, similar to the Oru Lake. They lost the foam, so I don't know if they'll float. I don't know if they sell extras. They do sell like little outriggers you can attach to the sides to give it more stability, and that'll probably help it stay afloat. The Oru definitely takes more effort to put together. You do have to attach several clips and you do have to use force. You can't just easily put them together. Like the Oru is quite nice. Once you get the initial folds popped out, the clips go in and you just pull it tight. Pretty easy. Just keep it loose initially, and so it's easy to clip, and then just pull it tight. Whereas this one, there's all kind of levering, and there's one attachment there, 2, 4, and then there's one on the front, and then there's another one on the back. And those are difficult. I found I had to be on my knees and really push my body weight into it to get it over. But once it's assembled, it's pretty rigid. And I also kind of screwed up with this on the assembly. The cable was wrapped up wrong, so it wouldn't work. But that's a nice little skeg. Once you get in the water, you can actually drop it from inside. There's a little rope in there. You can drop it and it keeps you going straight. The principle is nice, but oftentimes I find that when you assemble it, it gets crooked. So it kind of makes you go crooked. So we'll see. The bottom is a little scraped up on that because of a lot of use. And overall, it's got a lot of little scratches on there because I've been using it too, and it works pretty well actually. One problem I had with this on a really windy day on a lake was the waves came from the front. It would enter this and it actually shot inside. It would go up and come inside. So I noticed that the newer models have a little band that clips it together so it keeps it closed. So I'm glad they addressed that problem because that was a big problem. Mildly wavy waves, I didn't feel comfortable taking this with me. If you look at the two kayaks, you'll see they're almost a similar width, but the Oru looks like it's narrower because the sides are thick. There's a gap there, so the usable area isn't as wide as you would think. Whereas the Tucktec, it's wide open. It's just all round, so you can use it as much as you want, and it's wide open. It's like a canoe, except plastic and just wide open. They do have these plastic bars in this bottom just to give it more rigidity, so when you step it doesn't buckle. And like I said, the seat doesn't look the best. Overall, I'd say appearances wise, the Oru wins big time. Even if the Tucktec had a better seat, it just looks like a kayak with the ridge on the top and on the back, and it just, the folds, it just looks sleek. Whereas the Tucktec has a few folds, but it's just kind of curvy on the bottom. It's very odd looking, right? The Oru is an incredibly stiff kayak. The way it's folded, it reinforces itself. This part, the strap here, everything is just well designed so that when you're hitting some waves or stepping in, it doesn't bend in on itself at all. No matter how heavy you get, it doesn't bend. You might sink if you're too heavy for the weight capacity, but it doesn't bend. It's very strong. The Tucktec, however, see that in the front and the back? It buckles. And that's what they say if you're too heavy. I assembled the seat wrong, so it popped out. But they say if you're too heavy or if the sun's too strong, it'll weaken the plastic and it'll fold like this and it'll sink in the middle. And I think what they could do is try to have another set of straps that holds this together and something else that holds this together. Just give it more stability. So hitting the section of rapids that I hit before, I feel like when you hit, the front's gonna buckle up, and you do it too often, it might eventually break the plastic. When you're in calm water, it's not as much of a big deal. But I think if you're too heavy, it's gonna buckle and it might be a problem. I think because there's just no folds here. There's nothing giving it rigidity. Just these corners are holding it in, whereas that has like support columns. The Oru is very well engineered, I gotta say. Again, though, this is the original version of the Tucktec. The newer versions might have more rigidity to it, so it might not be as much of an issue. Although they use a similar technology with the two clasps on each side, kind of holding the corners in, and then a clasp on the front and one in the back, just kind of holding everything in. Here is the bottom of the kayak, and you see the dirt is on the corner, but it's nice they put this plastic reinforcement to protect that corner. And you'll see that the bottom is just wide open, flat plastic like a canoe. They did reinforce these. They covered the corners so it wouldn't get damaged when you're hitting a sand embankment or something, but it's just wide open. There's nothing that would take all the abrasion, and the parts that would, they covered it up with another piece of plastic. So in that aspect, I think the durability of this would be fantastic. And you can see all the scratches on here, way more scratches than I thought. But you can see a lot, maybe from rocks, I don't know. But they just have these rivets. Overall, no weak points that I can really identify that would wear out and start leaking. It's just big, flat, wide open kayak. This is the rear again. And here's the skeg, and this is the way it would drop when you're in the water. It's pretty nice actually. You just release the rope and it just drops and just functions. It's a pretty cheap, simple way of adding that feature in. This is the bottom of the kayak. Generally, if you sit inside, the bottom part will bulge just a little bit. Not a lot, because that orange platform with the metal actually does a great job supporting your weight. But the parts that hit things the most often are these corners. These two, which are the lowest, tend to always hit things. And this is the front of the kayak, and you'll see there's dirt as well, because those are the parts that sit on the ground when you assemble and disassemble. That's why I was telling you it's important to have some kind of base when you assemble on anything hard, because you don't want to wear out the plastic in these joints right here and right there. Those are the key weak points, I believe. And I don't think they were weak just because of bending back and forth over and over. I think they're weak because of possible abrasion is isolated to 4 tiny areas, like here, 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 and here. Those are the lowest, these two especially, these are the lowest points, and they'll always hit something if you're going to hit anything at all. I'm not quite sure why the designers put these black parts in. They look like feet that were put in to help absorb any kind of abrasion, but they look brand new because it's the ends. These fold lower than those, so I wish that they would put maybe shorter ones higher, maybe one here and another one here, or just something to protect these corners right here. Over there it's too far. I don't think it does anything. From this view you can also see the water in the channels. They just get in, and no matter what I do to stop, to get it out, I just can't get them out. I don't know what the secret is, really. And there's actual water here, and over here, there's just moisture, because some of the water evaporated when I had it in the sun, but it's just not working as well. This is the rope for the skeg, and you just pull it, and it pulls it up and it holds it tight right here. And to release it, you just pull this side and it drops down. Sometimes I'll open up the seat like this just so I could cross my legs and put my feet there. And it's comfortable enough. The seat's still thick enough and it still keeps my butt dry, but normally you're supposed to have it like that and strap down. On the Tucktec, the footrests do come with the base model. It just comes with one cord that adjusts and you kind of have it balanced. There's a PVC pipe in there and you got to kind of center it yourself. But it works, it's good enough. Not the most elegant. Whereas on the Oru, it's two straps, flat, hard plastic. It's actually designed really well, like it comes with it like that. It's very good design. The other big difference between these two kayaks is this one has a lot of nylon straps, and the seat is just kind of fabric. The back is fabric. It gets wet, it gets soaking wet. It takes a while to dry. Whereas the Tucktec is just simple closed cell foam. The outside gets wet and the little cavities on the outside get wet, but it dries really quickly. You just shake out the water and it dries really quickly. And it's all that's here except a couple of nylon straps, and you just have to have those dry out and these elastics. But overall, there's not as much to dry. The Oru has a lot of creases, a lot more creases in there because of the folding. And I find it's a little harder to get thoroughly clean. Whereas the Tucktec is just a flat slab of plastic. Once you disassemble it, it's just a flat slab of plastic and you can just wipe it down pretty easily. The grooves are pretty big, so you can actually run a paper towel through them and clean them. And I found that I can get this perfectly clean, whereas this is a little more difficult to get completely clean. Again, the Tucktec is just a flat slab of plastic. I showed you the bottom and there's really nothing sharp that would take the blunt of all the force down here. Whereas in the Oru, you see these folds and you get two isolated points where that takes all the damage, and in the back there are 2 points as well that takes all the abrasion and folding and rubbing. So those are the weak points, but the rest of it is really nice. It's just, unfortunately, that the seams and everything make it look really nice, but unfortunately the seams make it inevitably have isolated weak spots. Overall, they're both great kayaks. I feel like this you could put under more stress because it's much more rigid than this one. But at half the price, you know, you gotta give up some things. I've seen reviews where people say, yeah, for a Lake Sport, you can buy 2 of these. In fact, if you buy 2, they give you more of a discount. So you can get 2 of these and have 2 people go, whereas 1 with this. So it's a trade-off, really. As far as longevity, I've had this and used it quite a bit, and the bottom is well scratched up, as you saw. So it's not like I babied it, but I feel like there's no point that it's going to leak at all. I feel like the weak points might be these corners where you put a lot of stress as you assemble it, but there are no points I feel like are going to leak at all, and I'd be perfectly comfortable using this. I would definitely be aware that if you weigh closer to 250, it's probably not going to work for you because of that buckling weakness, whereas this, super solid, rock stable. I'm not sure what will happen if you put 300 pounds in, it probably just sinks. Whereas this will sink, but the ends will probably lift up as you sink. One interesting thing with this kayak, with that kayak, you can lean back and it doesn't affect the structure of the kayak at all. But the back seat is attached with these straps. But as you lean back, you see the sides buckle in. It's odd, right? I do believe when it buckles in, it gives it more structure, so it's less likely to buckle. But it's odd when you sit in and it does this kind of stuff. It's very flexible. It doesn't feel like it's going to sink at all when you do it, but it's very flexible. Some people buy their own seats and they put them in, because with the Velcro strap, you can put in anything. And it has its own back supports. It doesn't do this kind of thing. And it's also kind of weak. You can't really sit back. It's not that comfortable. So you might want to replace the seat. So it'll cost you a little bit more. But for the price, still can't really beat it. And that's my comparison of the two kayaks. I believe you can't really go wrong either way. If you get the Oru, you just have to be more gentle and try to protect those 4 corners that could leak. The Tucktec, I feel it's just rock solid. And I feel like you don't weigh it down too much. It's a piece of cake. And I feel like because it's just that 1/8 inch plastic, I feel like it's more carefree. When I handle it, I kind of bang it around and there's no chance that's gonna leak. Whereas the corners here, I'm always, like, it's always in the back of my mind that it's gonna rip. But that one, nothing at all, and it's been great. They both track about the same. I think the Oru might track a little worse because of lack of the skeg. And I find with the Oru, it tends to spin harder when there's any kind of current at all, whereas the Tucktec, it doesn't. I don't know exactly why. There is like a V shape in the back of the Oru, whereas the Tucktec is still narrow. And it has a skeg though, but I'm not sure. At least if you feel like the skeg is pushing around too much, you can pop it up, so it's not a limiting factor. Another thing I feel different about the Tucktec compared to the Oru is because it's 1/8 inch plastic, I feel like I could just clamp anything onto it and it doesn't really even leave a mark. It just, you can clamp something tightly and it's there. You can also attach suction cups to it because it's smooth plastic. It's a little curved, so be careful. Suction cup might pop out, especially if it flexes at all. But with the Oru, suction cups don't work at all. I tried, even on the smoothest feeling parts, it doesn't work. And I definitely don't want to clamp anything because they'll take that corrugated plastic and just pinch it right out. So with the Tucktec, I feel it's just like worry-free kayaking. And the fact that it's so much cheaper, I feel like it's okay if I damage it every now and then. Whereas with the Oru, I'm trying to be more delicate with it. Just looking at the two, you can tell it just looks nicer. You can tell it's gonna cost more. That is simpler, just simpler. Looks kind of cheap, the seat's cheap, the foam sides, there's metal components to it, and it just kind of round instead of like the sleek folds on the Oru. So if you are in it for looks, I would definitely go with the Oru, but just for the price, $350 for the Tucktec, it's hard to beat that. If you had to ask me which one I would pick over the other, I'm on a budget. If you're not on a budget at all, definitely go with the Oru. If you have a garage where you can stand it up so you can drain all the water out of the tracks, go with the Oru. But I'm trying to save my money, so the Tucktec for me is ideal because I feel like it's going to last longer and it's just cheaper. I could deal with not looking as nice as Oru. I could deal with taking almost twice as much time to assemble and disassemble, and it's not as easy to carry around because the things inside might slide around. They do sell a bag for it now, but I didn't buy that. I just use a really cheap Christmas tree bag I bought that fits the length. It doesn't fit well, but it does the job. And with the Tucktec, I feel like I could just clean it better. So if I go to a boat inspection, I feel better about how much cleaner I can have it. And there are no just weak spots on the bottom. I feel like I could take it anywhere and just scrape over the usual kind of rocks, which are usually moss covered, or logs that are waterlogged. And I have no fear that that's ever going to rip on something like that. Maybe a chunk of steel could gouge out a chunk of plastic with that, but overall it just feels much more durable. If you're new to kayaking, it might be better to go with the Oru because it is more rigid. So when you stand in it to get in, or when you get in or out, it doesn't buckle as much and when you move around. Whereas the Tucktec does kind of wobble a little, like with the seat I showed you. So, and when you get in, you can feel it wobbling as well. The Tucktec does wobble some when you get in as well, but it's much less compared to that. But the wobbling on the Tucktec is kind of throughout, whereas the Oru, the slight bit of wobbling is on the folds, especially in the front. You can feel it going up and down. So it may be rated for tens of thousands of folds or whatever, but because when you're in the water and it's doing this kind of thing, does that count as folding? I mean, it's still pressure. The Tucktec gets some of that as well, but not nearly as much. I would say for both kayaks, do not try to assemble or disassemble when it's extremely cold out. I did read that if you do that, the plastic becomes more brittle and you're more likely to break it. I haven't heard about that with the Oru, but it's plastic. In the winter, it'll become harder, more brittle, so I wouldn't do it. Plus the water's cold, but yeah, I wouldn't do it with either in the extreme cold. Overall, I'd say they're both similarly stable. The Oru might be a little better because the way the sides cut in, and the Tucktec has the foam, helps kind of splash the water out. They're both great. I mean, they both have a similar experience. I just wish the seat was better. I should get a better seat for the Tucktec. I just don't want more stuff to carry because the seat fits inside the folded Tucktec just fine. So I think I can live with it. With the Tucktec, I don't remember ever getting out and having my butt be completely soaked. Whereas with the Oru, that happens quite often because the base seat that comes with the Lake model is skinny and it absorbs water. So you're gonna get wet no matter what. And the thicker seat eventually soaks up the water because it's the way they're designed, it just soaks. It's not the open cell foam. Whereas that seat, that doesn't really suck up the water at all, so it's pretty dry. If weight is a factor to you, of course the Lake is much lighter, so I would definitely go with that. Overall, I wish you could try both kayaks to see which one might work for you better. I would say they just both work similarly, except the Tucktec wobbles more. The Oru is more rigid. Sleeker, easier to set up. Lighter, you don't have to force it as much as compared to the Tucktec. So if you're a little weaker, I would say go with the Oru. But if you are a little weaker and you get to Oru, have someone set it up and break it down a couple times in the very beginning, because once you get it new, it is super stiff. But once you assemble it and disassemble a couple times, it becomes much easier. The Tucktec is just kind of rigid all around. You really have to put your weight into it. You can't just use your arms. But again though, this is an older version of the Tucktec. The newer versions, they're similar, but the clasping mechanisms are a little different. The way it levers the folds in place are the same, so it could be the same. I do like how the Tucktec has a little handle in the front and the back. The Oru does not. When I was paddling up the hole, there was a section that was just way too shallow, so I had to get out and drag it. And it wasn't the best. I had to actually bend over because I didn't use the strap at that part. But with the Tucktec, there's a nice little handle. It's actually quite nice. You could easily loop something through it. With the Tucktec too, you can actually adjust the seat forward and backward, so you can be more in the center of the kayak, so the back doesn't dip down, so you don't scrape the back as much. So you just kind of be more level. Whereas the Oru, the seat is where it's going to be. You can't change it. You can't move the back forward at all. It's right with the fold, so there's no adjusting it at all. But the Tucktec, you can adjust it quite a bit. In fact, they do sell hacking kits where they have a rivet gun and some rivets, and you could just like put rivets in it and hook things up. Because it's just a sheet of plastic, it's fine. As long as you do it above the water level, you can just pop rivets in and do whatever you want. You could drill holes, clamp stuff in. You can kind of modify as much as you want. It's actually quite nice because of that. They sell all kinds of kits, like fishing kits you can clamp on. Whereas the Oru, it's that you can't really clamp anything onto the Oru because the corrugated plastic would collapse on itself. It's quite interesting, the differences. But if you're gonna go fishing with the kayaks, I would say go with the Tucktec. It's just much easier to clean afterwards too if you get blood everywhere or just fish slime. And just being able to clamp things onto the plastic is a huge bonus. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you get to spend some time in the water as well. Both kayaks are great. I wish you could spend some time with either. Again, go over my points, look at the weights, pros, cons of each, and you can decide for yourself which one might be good for you. And I will talk to you later. Yeah, have a good night. Bye. I wish they kind of disassembled themselves. Going back to the elegance of the Oru, with the Tucktec, you just kind of clip this shoulder strap. This was what held the back in place. You just kind of clip it onto whatever, and that's your shoulder strap. And it's not the most comfortable. It kind of bangs around your hip, especially because it's heavier. But there's no real good handle necessarily for this, except that Velcro strap. And this strap is what held the seat in place. So everything gets reused. So everything here is used again, but it's not the most elegant, especially compared to the Oru.